Order. Urgent question, Mark Francois.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union if he will outline what checks the House of Commons has over the powers of the joint committee contained in the proposed EU Withdrawal Agreement.
Minister Kwasi-Kwarteng.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As is common in international agreements, the Withdrawal Agreement provides for a joint committee comprising representatives of the UK and the EU to govern the implementation and application of the Withdrawal Agreement. The joint committee will have the powers listed in Article 164 of the agreement to ensure both parties are able to discuss any issues that may arise concerning the management and operation of the Withdrawal Agreement. As set out in paragraph 3 of Article 166, the Joint Committee will make all its decisions and recommendations by, I quote, mutual consent of the parties. In other words, it cannot act if the UK does not agree. This is an important protection, Mr. Speaker, for the UK, which honourable and right honourable members should welcome. Clearly, Parliament will expect that it will be able to undertake scrutiny of the work of the Joint Committee, as indeed will the European Parliament. Quite how that will operate is something which the Government will discuss with members of this House and the other place, should this House give its support to the Withdrawal Agreement. But this House should be in no doubt. The Government's approach at the Joint Committee will be underpinned by full ministerial accountability to Parliament.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting this urgent question today, as the Prime Minister is now due to attend the critical European Council tomorrow and Friday. However, despite the imminence of these crucial negotiations, very few members of Parliament in this House are, I believe, sir, even aware of the extensive powers of an EU-UK joint committee contained within the Withdrawal Agreement. And I think it's very important, sir, that these are brought to the attention of the House before the Prime Minister attends the Council tomorrow, hence my request this morning. The Joint Committee is designed to oversee all aspects of the operation of the agreement and, crucially, for managing and supervising the implementation and operation of the future relationship as well. Its potentially wide-ranging powers are contained in Articles 164 to 166 of the Withdrawal Agreement and its rules of procedure, which themselves are an integral part of the treaty and are found at Annex 8, almost literally at the back of the 585-page document. There is, in fairness, an Annex 9. The decisions of the committee have full force in international law, equivalent to the treaty itself, as guaranteed in Article 166. The committee can meet in private, does not have to publish its agenda, does not have to publish any minutes or even a summary of its minutes, and can be chaired by two unelected civil servants nominated by either side rather than by ministers. Under its rules of procedure, the two co-chairmen acting outside of normal meetings can even make legally binding decisions in its name by an exchange of notes, without any recourse to or consent from Parliament. Rule 9 of the Rules and Procedures clearly states on page 565 of the treaty, and I quote from it directly, sir, Rule 9, Decisions and Recommendations, 1. In the period between meetings, the Joint Committee may adopt decisions or recommendations by written procedure, if the co-chairs decide to use this procedure. The written procedure shall consist of an exchange of notes between the co-chairs. 2. Where the Joint Committee adopts decisions or recommendations, the decision or recommendation, respectively, shall be inserted in the title of such acts. The Secretariat shall record any decision or recommendation under a serial number and with a reference to the date of its adoption. Mr. Speaker, that is almost exactly the same procedure for notifying and recording EU directives and regulations. Despite all of this, the committee has hardly ever been mentioned in Parliament, and few ministers have ever referred to it directly throughout the extensive debates that we have had during this session on the whole issue of Brexit in the round. Crucially, the Joint Committee is contained within the treaty and therefore has the force of international law behind it, sir, but is outside of the backstop, which is perhaps why it's received less attention than other aspects of the withdrawal agreement to date. I believe this has been extremely cleverly drafted to hand control of future elements of this country's destiny deliberately to unelected civil servants rather than to ministers, civil servants who are unanswerable to this House of Commons in a way that ministers are. And they thought of everything, Mr. Speaker. As Rule 12 of Annex 8 is entitled Expenses, and it even lays out how they can claim their expenses as well. At present, Parliament seems blissfully unaware of the ability of the Joint Committee to take legally binding decisions relating to any future aspect of the treaty or the future relationship effectively above Parliament's head. There are clear issues of accountability to Parliament, which, as far as I'm aware, have never been debated in the House at all. So I ask the Minister, can he confirm that everything I have said is true? And if any of it is not true, could he point out where and why? And therefore, could he explain, if it is true, which it is, what checks and balances this House has over the operation of the committee? In summary, Mr. Speaker, the Joint Committee contained within the draft withdrawal agreement— thank you, Bishop— the Joint Committee contained within the draft withdrawal agreement has hardly ever been discussed in the House of Commons or the media, despite the fact that it gives potentially to unelected civil servants the power to make decisions which are binding in international law by an exchange of notes without knowledge, let alone the consent, sir, of this House. If we are to approve the withdrawal agreement, we approve this procedure too, which is why it's so important we should know about it. I believe, sir, that these facts must be exposed for debate in this House before the Prime Minister departs for the Council tomorrow, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for granting the urgent question, and I look forward— I am intrigued to hear the Minister's reply.
Thank you. Well, my right honourable friend asked me which bits of what he said I agreed with or were true, and which I thought were not true. Clearly, I agree with some of the things he said, and I think some of the things he said were slightly off the mark. The assumption underlying his question, as it seemed to me, was that the joint agreement was joint committee, was some subterranean plot, wire pullers, an attempt to somehow subvert the will of this House or subvert our democracy. He will understand, as will the House, that the structure of a joint committee is very common in international agreements. An international agreement with two parties has to have a point of arbitration, and the joint committee, comprising representatives of the UK and the EU, it's separate to the arbitration panel, that's true, but it will decide and govern the implementation and application of the withdrawal agreement. This is entirely in keeping with what happens in international treaties. I would also suggest, if he does not insist on heckling me, I will also suggest that the key part of all of this is point 3 of Article 166, which refers to mutual consent. The Joint Committee simply cannot act if the UK does not agree. And on that point, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the UK government's relationship with this Parliament, there will be full and ample opportunity, as we have done in the last 4 months, Mr. Speaker, to debate provisions or recommendations of the Joint Committee. I'd like to stress in my final part of the answer to my honourable friend that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister herself, has spent no less than 20 hours at this dispatch box in the last 4 months. So there's full and ample range of debate and discussion.